Good morning, friends. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us for Coffee Talk. We got coffee. It's a good day. It's a good day to just take a deep breath and to see where God is leading and to look back and look forward. And these are all wonderful things, and we want to invite you into it. We gather on these mornings to kind of just do some reflecting, because we don't always get the chance when we hear things on Sunday, but we want to be able to kind of chew and reflect on them and process them a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that that came out in this last week of this series of the Sermon on the Mount, the view from the top, I don't even know, is we're working through these case studies, mm-hmm. and I think this is really good. But I think we also have to keep reminding ourselves of the big overarching picture, because otherwise mm-hmm. we get stuck in that one week, mm-hmm. right? And so we're in the middle of some case studies. Mm-hmm. And so, Jeff, you led us through this passage that talks about divorce, mm-hmm. and talk about a hot topic. Mm-hmm. And yep. Like we're mm-hmm. only, not even a quarter into the Sermon on the Mount, yep. and we're going for the deep end. So
Jesus doesn't pull any punches. He just tells what it is. He just starts laying them out.
and Jesus is pointing to something mm-hmm. greater and bigger and better, mm-hmm. because he's saying, I'm the fulfillment of the Old Testament law, because you've heard this, and I'm going to say, mm-hmm. here's how we actually should look at it. And I love that continual reminder of Jesus as the fulfillment of all these things that we've heard before. And so as we look at this case study of marriage and divorce, one of the things that Jesus points out is you have heard it said, and it's permissible, but God allowed it to be permissible, Jesus says, because of the hardness of your hearts. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that sparks the question, okay, what is he saying by hardness of heart there? Mm-hmm.
Well, clearly it's plaque buildup in your arteries.
Yeah.
Heart disease.
Yeah, too much cream in their coffee.
Stay off the butter.
Too much fat on the fattened calf.
That's right.
Well, it's one of the things that for me where that phrase pops up most readily is in Moses' encounters with Pharaoh,
mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
And we see that's exactly what's said about Pharaoh again and again. Yeah. He did not let the people go because his heart was hard.
Yeah.
And look at the destruction that follows. And I wonder how many people listening to Jesus would go, wait a minute, hardness of heart. Like, am I becoming like Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Am I
mm-hmm.
in this situation? And so, I wonder how many of them in their consciousness would kind of go back there, because I certainly do. Yeah. And I think about of all the things that we glean from that, what a parable of the devastation that comes when your heart is hard.
Yeah.
And the fact that God allowed it.
Yeah.
God said, okay, Pharaoh, go ahead. If you want to harden your heart, go right ahead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which then, I guess, prompts me to go, okay, how am I pursuing the alternative, right? A softness of heart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And working towards maintaining that. Yeah. For the goodness of my relationship with God and others, right?
Yeah.
Like if Jesus has just said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, boom, right there, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't do that with a hard heart.
Yeah.
If my heart is hard, I cannot obey that command.
Mm-hmm.
And then I cannot love my neighbor as myself either.
Mm-hmm.
It gets annoying. But anyways, you probably were leading us into something.
No, but I think that's the challenge is being able to maybe recognize, do I have a hard heart? I think identify, mm-hmm. but then also, okay, Jesus is saying, maybe react to that, and not react, but like respond to it. Okay, mm-hmm. what does that mean now?
Yeah.
Let's say I sit back and evaluate and say, okay, I do have. Now, here's another thing is, we're talking very specifically. This is a case study. Mm-hmm. This is marriage, mm-hmm. hardness of heart, whatever. That obviously doesn't mean that only those who get divorced have a hardened heart, right? Right. There's a larger context to this, and Jesus is even saying, even in the midst of all these case studies, this is actually something that touches everybody. whether it's anger, whether it's lust from a male or female perspective, whether it's divorce or a lot of these other things that he's going to be leading us to. This is not just a specific person. This is actually something that touches all of us. And so how do we then recognize we have a hard heart, and B, how do we respond to it? So that's maybe my question. How do you recognize right away, oh man, I think my heart is hard? How do we know?
You know, the first step in a lot of recovery programs, which I think we're all in a recovery program, if we're following Jesus, is recognizing and admitting, and I think you touched on that right away. I think we all need to recognize and admit that we are at least prone to a hard heart. We're walking down, without intervention, we're walking down that path. That's the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
As far as, or it's the path that we naturally go if we don't resist, or if we don't change, if we don't get help. So I think we all need to recognize and admit, I am prone to hardness of heart.
Yeah.
And then reflect, where am I? And if we think I'm not hard-hearted, you probably are. You know, if I'm
Denial, is that the first?
Yeah, you know, there's a book we've talked about, you and I especially, it's called The Sin of Certainty. And I don't know about the book necessarily, but the title is so intriguing. We have this idea that we need to be certain about things. And as soon as we're certain, we kind of shut off any attack against what we're certain about. And I think that's the start of a hard heart. You know, there is one thing we can be certain about, and that's that Jesus, right? But exactly how he works in my heart and other people's hearts, exactly what he's doing at any given time, I don't think we can be certain about that, except that he's working for the good and we can trust him. But as soon as we are like, this is how it is, that's what the Pharisees did, and they had hard hearts, right? So I think that's the first step. Yeah.
I think we could all use a magic mirror, and when I develop one, I'll become rich. Just, brushing your teeth in the morning, and you look right into it. It tells you a scale of how hard your heart is.
Will you, or you'll be cursed by everybody because they don't want to see themselves?
I don't know. I just think, if we really are passionate, it'd be something. But in seriousness, I mean, you've probably all heard the expression, right? Sometimes I wake up grumpy, and sometimes I let them sleep in. And I think that level of grumpiness for me, right? If I'm grumpy, then I'm probably hard towards something. And so as I think of it, and I've listened to what you've said, Jeff, I think in my thinking is, one of those tests might just be to ask Sheena, hey, what was the last thing I thanked you for? Or what was the last thing I showed gratitude for? Because if I'm unable to express gratefulness or gratitude for something, I'm probably pretty already past hard. And I think the counter to hardness, though, is just affirming that actually I'm not doing this on my own. There's people in my life who are for me, with me, and I'm grateful for them. And when I can express gratefulness and gratitude and just say thank you for things, that perpetuates me into softness and battles hardness. Because when I am hardest, I am thinking, I'm all on my own, nobody's with me, this is all me, I'm making it myself, and whatever. It's that attitude it reveals, the level of hardness.
I would wonder too, only because I think in this very wide open question, it takes me back to kind of my roots. And my roots were, for sure, my parents had a list of verses that we were to memorize as kids, and we were challenged and so encouraged to the point where, okay, I'll give you money. I'll give you money if you do whatever, right? Okay. Proverbs 3, 5, 6, and 7, because it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and shun evil. And I wonder, when I look at that passage, if that whole thing was reversed, chances are I probably have a pretty hard heart. If I'm trusting not in God and leaning on my own understanding, I think it's pretty clear that very clearly my heart is becoming hard, and I'm not acknowledging that actually God is with me. And I would say like you said, Chris, too. If I am trying to do even life on my own, like when I am excited to get people away from me, I think very clearly I have a hardness of heart happening. And not that we don't need moments of rest and renewal and introversion. I think there's actually opportunities there, and I think very clearly Jesus showed an example of that. You know, I need to just go and pray, and I'm going to be quiet for a bit. And it wasn't a pushing people away. It actually was instead saying, I'm going to trust God more and more so that I can be excited to be with people. And I think for me, it goes back to even just that sense of being able to look at it in reverse, but also then putting that verse back in its right place and saying, God, may I trust you with all my heart, and may I lean not on my own understanding. I think that in those ways it kind of softens, and essentially I think that's the point of prayer and worship too, right? Like to soften our heart and to bring things to the forefront and like kind of do that mirror thing. Right?
It's kind of a pretty powerful visual too. If you're leaning, you can't really lean on yourself. You'll fall over, right? But I mean, I guess if you're standing straight, that's sort of leaning on yourself. But leaning, you tend to think of on something, right?
Yeah.
Well, what is it on? On myself, I'm going to fall, you know. But if I lean on the Lord, and I think that does bring it back to, okay, recognize that we do come to Jesus, right? Like that, we're always at the end of. I don't know if you've noticed that pattern, but we tend to always end our sermon or at some place in that. Turn to Jesus, right? Keep coming to Him. Why? Because trust in the Lord with all your heart. Like, you can't trust in Him if you're not coming to Him. Yeah. And we so easily and often and regularly, probably every minute, are turning to something, and we have to, be called back, right? Like so once a week on Sundays is not nearly enough to be called back. Trust in the Lord, turn to Jesus. And I mean, so, sorry, how do you get a soft heart? Only in Him, only in Jesus, right? Well, you get that. I'm reminded, you went back to Moses.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of King David, a man after God's own heart. Why? Because he would turn away radically. Like, this man is pretty despicable. But he's called a man after God's own heart, and I think it's because he keeps coming back. Cleanse me, O God. I've sinned. I've failed. He humbles himself, turns to Jesus, turns to God, and recognizes it and asks for a clean heart. Right?
Mm. Yeah. So maybe that's just the question for you. Mm-hmm. How do you keep a soft heart? How do you understand whether you have a hard heart? And what does that mean? Whether it's in your marriage or in your family or in your work and school relationships, that God is calling us to soften our hearts more and more and more through this whole passage. But whether we're studying this passage or not, God is calling us to soften our hearts and to allow Him to have roots there more than our own desires So we encourage you in that. As we look forward now, it comes out on a Thursday, and so we're glad you're joining with us. But if you are watching this on Thursday, or even Friday, or possibly Saturday, you might still have an opportunity. Chris, do you want to tell us about the opportunity this week?
Saturday night is the Warriors Faith Night, and so pretty much everybody who ordered tickets has already gotten them by game time. Certainly that'll be the case. But yeah, if you picked up tickets, then make sure you join us. Don't forget to use them. Hopefully you're well enough to do so and avoiding, and there's colds and stuff going around, but we'd love to spend time together and cheer on the Warriors at the same time, or the Clippers if you're so inclined. the opponents of the night, from a wonderful place that shall not be named at this moment. Anyways, yeah, so that's Saturday night. And you know what, it's really, of all things, it's a celebration of what Don has been able to do. Not praising Don, but just celebrating the chaplaincy program, that there are people in sport who are trying to pursue excellence in sport while pursuing Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to kind of just celebrate. That this is a development program of young men, and faith is part of that for some.
Yeah, and to celebrate, you know, especially the fact that this organization allows that to happen. You know, I think that's a praise God item. So
absolutely,
hey, I'll come watch a game and cheer, and
I hope one year, because I know the chaplain of the Langley hockey team. I would love one year for Faith Night to be Langley v West Kelowna. I should put this in Don's ear. This is just me. And I would love to see the two chaplains on the ice.
Oh, instead of the pastors.
Let's figure out some, second intermission chaplain
fun.
head-to-head contest, because that would be pretty fun to see out there. But anyways,
Awesome. So we look forward to that, and we look forward to seeing you Sunday and gathering Sundays, and encourage you to dive deep into a life group as well too, where you can have these kinds of discussions and encouragements of one another, and introspection in a mirror. So blessings on you. Have a wonderful week.